It was the kind of night that soaked through every layer of your skin, where the rain didn't fall so much as it breathed against you, warm and relentless, a living thing that swallowed sound and thought alike. The jungle in Leyte was heavy that, pressing down on us with the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes. We'd been moving for days through the thick green hell, our boots rotting, our uniforms stinking of sweat and mold, and every inch of us feeling older than time itself. I was 24, though I'd stopped counting somewhere between the first time I saw a man die and the last time clean. The air was a mixture of salt and decay, that strange smell of death that clings to everything even when nothing's died. The rain ran down our helmets in sheets, turning the ground into a black river that sucked at our feet. Every branch that snapped in the dark felt like a rifle. Every gust of wind carried the ghost of a voice. We were 10 men by then, what was left of a platoon that had once been 30. The jungle had taken more than the Japanese ever could. Malaria, fever, bad water, and the kind of despair that chews at your mind until it's hollow. I carried my rifle like a lifeline, finger brushing the trigger even when there was no reason to. You didn't relax out there. You couldn't, because the moment you did, the jungle reminded you that it owned you. The insects alone could drive a man insane. The buzzing, the biting, the constant hum that felt like it was crawling under your skin. And through it all, there was the distant boom of artillery from somewhere over the ridge, the heartbeat of the war, steady and endless, reminding us we were just pieces in something far bigger and far more cruel than we could understand. That night, we stumbled upon what used to be an outpost, or maybe a camp. It was hard to tell anymore. The place was half burned, a few huts still standing, their bamboo walls blackened by fire. The air smelled of smoke and something else. Old blood, maybe. The kind that dries into the earth and never really goes away. Inside one of the shacks, we found remnants of life, a few metal cups, a torn uniform sleeve, a child's sandal. That one hit me hardest. You see something like that, and you realize how deep the war runs. It doesn't stop at soldiers. It eats everything. We were about to move on when Haynes called out. He was standing near the edge of the clearing, his voice low, uncertain. "Lieutenant," he said, "you better come see this." His flashlight beam trembled against the trees. I came up beside him, rifle ready, heart thudding hard enough to make my chest hurt. From behind a cluster of palms, something shifted. For a second, I thought it was a wounded soldier, crawling. Then the light caught her face. She was small, frail, really, her uniform hanging off her like it belonged to someone else. Her hair was plastered to her face, streaked with mud, eyes hollow but fierce. A Japanese woman, probably a nurse or a communications aide. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak, just stood there, drenched, clutching something to her chest. I thought it was a weapon at first, but when I stepped closer, I saw it was a folded piece of cloth, a flag, stained and torn, the red circle barely visible beneath the grime. "Easy," I said, raising a hand. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me with those dark, bottomless eyes that seemed to carry a lifetime of hate and sorrow all at once. I told her, in broken Japanese, to drop it. She shook her head, whispered something I couldn't catch. I took another step, mud sucking at my boots, and then she said, in English, soft, accented, but clear, "I do not want to die." I froze. That wasn't something we heard often from their side. They were taught to die before surrender. It was an honor thing, the Bushido code, death before shame. We'd seen it too many times. Men throwing themselves on grenades, women clutching children as they ran off cliffs rather than face capture. But this one, she was different. There was something in her voice, not fear exactly, but exhaustion, the kind that comes from losing everything worth dying for. Haynes muttered behind me, "What the hell's she doing here alone?" Nobody answered. The rain kept falling, louder now, hammering the leaves like static. I motioned for the others to lower their... She was no... Her hands trembled as she unfolded the cloth she'd been... It wasn't just a flag. Inside it was a photograph. A man in uniform, smiling faintly beside her, cherry blossoms in the background. Her husband, maybe, or a brother. She looked at it for a long time before holding it out to me. I hesitated, then took it. The photo was damp, edges curling, faces fading. Still, I could see the life in their eyes, the same life we all carried once, before the killing started. She said something in Japanese then, soft, broken, and I could only understand part of it. Something about honor, about how everything she believed had burned away with that camp. Then she looked straight into me, her voice barely a whisper. "I've never seen a man like you." The words hit harder than any bullet, not because of what she said, but how she said it. Not awe, not admiration, just disbelief, like the idea of mercy from an enemy was something she couldn't comprehend. And standing there, soaked in the rain, rifle hanging limp at my side, I realized she wasn't the only one questioning what it meant to be human anymore. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The rain between us felt like a wall, and yet I could see her so clearly. Her face, her trembling hands, the flicker of life still clinging to her. I didn't know if we were enemies, or just two people trying to survive a world that had forgotten how to forgive. Tell me in the comments, from where are you hearing this story? We brought her back to the perimeter of what was left of our camp, if you could even call it that. A few foxholes half filled with rainwater, a canvas tarp sagging between two trees, and a fire that struggled to stay alive under the endless drizzle. The night was swallowing itself in darkness, the sky heavy and low, thunder rolling somewhere far off like the groan of a tired god. I remember how quiet the men were. No jokes, no whispers, not even the usual curses that filled the silence when fear was too thick to breathe through. They just stared at her, some with suspicion, some with pity, others with nothing at all, because war has a way of burning the feeling out of her. She sat near the fire, her knees drawn up, the soaked uniform clinging to her like a second skin. Her hands shook, but she didn't cry, not once. That's what struck me most. I'd seen hardened Marines break down after half what she'd been through, but she kept her head high, even in defeat. There was something unbreakable in her eyes, a kind of sorrow that didn't bend but burned quietly, like a lantern in the fog. Haynes handed me a canteen and muttered, "You sure we should keep her here, Lieutenant? Orders say prisoners go back for interrogation." I nodded, but didn't answer. We were deep in the jungle, days from any base. There was nowhere to send her, and no one willing to waste manpower escorting a single prisoner. "She's not going anywhere," I finally said. "We'll take her when we move." He grumbled, turned away, but that was the end of it. We all knew she wasn't a threat, not in the way the enemy usually was, but her presence stirred something uneasy, like the jungle itself had gone still to listen. Later that night, while the others slept or pretended to, I sat across from her. The firelight danced between us, making her face look both young and ancient at the same time. She held the photograph in her hands, fingers tracing the faces like they were made of glass. I tried speaking a few words in Japanese, the little I'd picked up from a pamphlet we'd been given before landing. She listened, then shook her head, her lips curving into the faintest hint of a smile. She spoke softly, pointing to the photo. My husband," she said. "He died 2 weeks ago, here." Her English was broken, fragile, but the meaning was a blade that cut clean. I didn't know what to say. We'd probably killed him. Maybe one of our mortars had hit his position. Maybe I'd even pulled the trigger myself without knowing it. That thought sat heavy in my chest. She looked at me then, eyes glinting in the firelight. "You kill?" she asked. I didn't answer. She nodded, as if that silence was all the confirmation she needed. The jungle whispered around us, branches creaking, raindrops tapping like fingers on the leaves. For a long time, we just sat there, two people from opposite worlds, bound by the same dirt, the same hunger, the same loss. It's strange how war strips everything away until all that's left is the simple truth of being human. I saw her shoulders tremble once, a flicker of something cracking beneath that hard shell of pride. She whispered something then, too low for me to catch, but I recognized one word: home. That word cut deeper than any bullet. Home. I hadn't seen mine in years. My mother's letters came fewer now, her handwriting weaker. My father had stopped writing altogether. Every face from before the war felt like a dream I wasn't sure I'd actually lived. Maybe she felt the same. I handed her a small tin of rations, beans and some dried meat. She looked at it like she wasn't sure it was real. When she finally ate, she did it slowly, carefully, like every bite was both shame and salvation. I turned away to give her space, but she said my name, or tried to. "Thomas, sis," she murmured. I hadn't told her, but it was stitched on my jacket. Hearing it in her accent did something strange to me, something I couldn't explain then and still can't now. There was no enemy left between us in that moment, just two broken people clinging to whatever scraps of mercy were left in the world. When morning came, the rain finally stopped. A thin mist rolled across the camp, and the sunlight that broke through the trees looked almost holy after so many days of darkness. The men were restless, packing up what little gear we had left. Orders came down the radio to move toward the coast. I knew we couldn't take her with us, not safely. Too much ground to cover, too many patrols between us and the extraction point. I told Haynes we'd leave her near the river, give her a chance to find her people or surrender properly. He didn't argue, but the look he gave me said enough. Mercy was a dangerous thing out there. It made you soft, made you slow, and slow men didn't live long. But I couldn't shake what she'd said the night before. how she'd looked at me like she couldn't decide if I was her captor or her savior. "I've never seen a man like you." Those words kept echoing, not as praise, but as a question. What kind of man was I now? The kind who followed orders, or the kind who remembered how to be human? The war blurred that line so often that most of us stopped trying to find it. But sitting there, watching her wrap that photo again, I wanted, for the first time in months, to be the man my mother thought I still was. We left at dawn. The jungle was quiet again, but not in the same way. It was a watchful quiet, the kind that feels like it's holding its breath. I looked back once. She was standing by the fire pit, the smoke curling around her like a shroud. She didn't wave. Neither did I. Some goodbyes don't need words. And if you've ever felt something shift in you while hearing a story like this, that pull between duty and compassion, then stay close. There are more memories I need to let out, more truths that weigh heavier than the pack I carried through that jungle. Subscribe so you can walk this road with me, one story at a time, before they fade completely. We moved out at first light, 5 men across the mud trail, packs lighter than they'd ever been, hearts heavier than I can describe. The jungle swallowed us again. All that green pressing in so close, it felt like the earth itself was trying to take us back. We didn't talk about her, not once, but she was there, behind every step, in the silence between our boots hitting the muck. When you've seen too much, you stop saying the things that matter out loud. You just carry them, like hidden bullets lodged somewhere deep inside you. By noon, the heat came. Not just heat, punishment. The air was thick enough to choke on. We were drenched in sweat, shirts sticking to our backs, rifles slick in our hands. The insects were relentless, biting until the blood welled up and mixed with the grime. Every few yards someone would stop to catch their breath, but I pushed them on. Orders said to reach the river by nightfall. That's where our extraction point was supposed to be. That was the plan. But plans in that place were like smoke, easy to see, impossible to hold. Around mid-afternoon, we found signs we weren't alone. A spent cartridge near the path, a broken branch with fresh sap bleeding from it. Haynes spotted a footprint, small, narrow, fresh. Japanese patrol, maybe 2 or 3 men, moving light. We spread out, rifles ready, nerves tight as wire. My mouth went dry. The jungle's silence turned from heavy to electric. You could feel it, that edge right before something happened. We took cover near a cluster of palms, watching the trail ahead. Nothing moved, but the feeling didn't fade. Minutes passed. Then, a shout, distant, but close enough to send a jolt through every one of us. The voice was sharp, foreign, followed by another, then gunfire, short bursts, not directed at us, not yet. I motioned for the men to stay low. We could see faint movement through the trees, shapes darting, shadows with rifle. They were searching for something, or someone. It took me a second too long to understand who. The woman. It hit me like a kick to the chest. We'd left her near the camp, defenseless. If her people found her, what would they do? Welcome her? No, not after surrender, not after being taken alive. I'd heard the stories. Surrender was shame. To be captured meant dishonor worse than death. The Japanese soldiers were taught to erase that shame themselves if they found it. I could have walked on, should have, but I didn't. Something twisted in me. Maybe it was guilt, maybe something else. I looked at Haynes. He knew before I spoke. "You're not serious," he hissed. "We can't go back. We've got orders." I just said, "She doesn't." We argued in whispers until I told him I'd go alone. The others could keep moving to the river. I'd catch up. He tried to stop me, but in war, men don't stop each other from doing what they believe will make their nightmares quieter. He just nodded finally and said, "You're gonna get yourself killed, Lieutenant." I shrugged, chambered around, and turned back toward the smoke. The jungle felt different now, alive, watching. Every step sounded louder than it should. I kept my rifle tight, eyes scanning, heart hammering. The sound of shouting grew closer. Japanese voices, sharp, angry. Then I saw the flicker of movement ahead. 3 of them, maybe 4, standing near the clearing where we'd camped. One of them was dragging something. I froze. It was her. She was on her knees, hands tied, her uniform darker now from mud and blood. They were yelling at her, one of them striking her across the face. She didn't cry. She just stared straight ahead, silent, defiant. Then one soldier drew his pistol. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. The first shot cracked through the trees, echoing like thunder. The man with the pistol dropped before he even fell. The others shouted, firing wild. Bullets sliced through leaves. Bark exploded near my head. I hit the ground, rolled behind a fallen log, returned fire. 2 more went down before the last one turned to run. I caught him in the shoulder. He spun, crashed into the mud. Then there was silence again. the kind that doesn't feel peaceful, just hollow. I rose, shaking, breath ragged. The woman was staring at me, eyes wide. She looked at the bodies, then at me, then down at her bound hands. I cut the rope with my knife. She didn't move. For a long second she just sat there, rain starting again, washing the blood from her face. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "Why?" I didn't have an answer. Because it felt right? Because I couldn't bear the thought of her dying after all she'd survived? Because I wanted to believe there was still something inside me that wasn't lost to this war? None of those words made it to my lips. I just said, because you didn't deserve to die like that. She blinked, as if the meaning took time to reach her. Then she picked up her photo from the mud, the one of her and the man. The edges were torn now, half covered in dirt. She pressed it to her chest, trembling, whispering something over and over in Japanese. I couldn't understand it, but the tone, it was prayer, grief, maybe both. We didn't stay long. The gunfire would bring more. I led her through the jungle, guiding her toward the river. She followed without a word, limping, soaked, her breathing shallow. The rain hid the sound of our steps, but not the fear between us. Each branch that snapped behind made my stomach tighten. We were two ghosts moving through a graveyard of trees. By dusk, we reached the river. It was wide, brown, and fast. The sound of rushing water drowned out everything else. I pointed toward the opposite bank. There, I said. You can follow it north. Your people might be that way. She looked at me for a long time, eyes searching for something. Maybe a reason, maybe forgiveness. Then she nodded once. Before she stepped into the water, she turned and said, "You, not like others." And then softer, "You see me." I didn't answer. I just watched her go, wading into the current, her figure slowly swallowed by mist. When she was gone, I stood there for a long time, rifle hanging limp, the rain washing over me like a confession. I didn't know if what I'd done was right or wrong, only that it was human. That night, when I finally caught up with my men, I didn't tell them what happened. Some things you keep because they're too heavy to hand off. But when I closed my eyes, I could still see her face. Not the fear, not the pain, but the strange peace that came after. And if you've stayed with me through this far, maybe that peace, that need to hold on to what's left of our humanity, is what brought you here too. If these stories speak to something inside you, if they make you feel the cost of what war takes from a soul, then subscribe, stay. There's more I need to tell before time erases the sound of it. The next morning came with thunder, but it wasn't from the sky. It was artillery, American shells pounding the ridge ahead of us. The whole jungle shook with it, trees trembling like they were alive and afraid. The sound went straight through your bones. We knew what it meant. The main line had shifted. We were moving into the storm. My stomach turned when I realized we were walking toward the same hill where the Japanese had set up their defense, the place she had probably called home before we burned it to ash. War had a sick sense of humor that we marched through mud up to our knees, rifles held above our heads, sweat and rain mixing into one foul river running down our faces. Haynes kept cursing under his breath, his voice hoarse from thirst. Behind us, two new replacements trudged in silence, eyes wide, still smelling like they believed the uniform meant something. Poor bastards. They didn't know yet that the war doesn't care how brave you are. It only cares how long it takes to break you. By noon, the shelling stopped. That's when the jungle went too quiet again. The kind of silence that means trouble. You can always feel it before it comes. The birds stop singing. The air gets thick, and your heartbeat suddenly feels too loud. We were crossing a small stream when the first shots came. Sharp, fast, close. Haynes went down before he even shouted, a hole where his neck used to be. I dropped behind a fallen tree, mud splashing up into my face. The others hit the ground, firing blind into the trees. The enemy was dug in. Snipers, maybe a machine gun nest deeper in the brush. I screamed for cover fire, but nobody could hear. The jungle turned into chaos, leaves shredding under bullets. The air filled with that high-pitched hiss of rounds slicing through. I crawled forward, trying to find the flank. Every breath burned. My rifle jammed once, and for a moment I thought that was it. Then I heard a shout. English, close. One of ours calling for help. I turned. The kid behind me, one of the new guys, was hit in the leg. Blood gushing, eyes wild. He couldn't move. I could have kept crawling, could have stayed alive, but I didn't. I went back. Dragged him through the mud, rounds cracking inches from us. The jungle spitting death from every direction. His screams were loud enough to make the air shake. I remember thinking how strange it was that someone could sound that alive while dying. When we reached a small ditch, I dropped beside him. He was crying for his mother. That sound tore something out of me. I pressed my hand to the wound, uselessly whispering, "You're okay, kid, you're okay," though I knew he wasn't. His breathing got shallow, his eyes rolled back, and then he was gone. There's no silence like the one that follows death. Not even the jungle dared to breathe. I sat there with him for a moment that could have been a second or an hour, my hands shaking, my mouth dry, my head full of nothing but the sound of my own pulse. I wanted to scream. I wanted to vanish. I wanted to go home. But home wasn't real anymore. It was just a word I used to believe in. When I finally moved, I did it without thinking. Anger took the wheel. I reloaded, crawled forward, and flanked the machine gun nest. 2 of them were there, one manning the gun, another shouting coordinates. I fired. 3 rounds. The gunner's body fell sideways, blood spraying over the barrel. The second one turned, too slow. The 4th bullet took him in the chest. He collapsed into the mud, eyes still open. I stared at him longer than I should have. He couldn't have been older than 20. And then I saw it, around his neck, a small photograph, laminated, hanging by a cord, a woman and a child. My hands went cold. It looked like the photo the nurse had shown me. The same posture, the same faint smile, even the same cherry blossoms in the background. My stomach dropped. I don't know if it was him, her husband, but in that moment it didn't matter. The realization hit like a knife. I'd killed someone who could have been him, maybe was him, the man she had prayed for, the man she had mourned. The circle closed right there, in that pit of mud and blood. I sat there shaking, rifle still hot, hands filthy. Everything spun. The world felt like it was falling in on itself. No good guys, no bad guys, just human beings killing mirrors of themselves. I'd saved her only to kill what she'd lost. That's when I understood what she'd meant back then. I've never seen a man like you. Maybe she hadn't meant mercy. Maybe she meant madness, the kind that makes a man human in one breath and a monster in the next. By the time the firefight ended, most of my men were gone, 3 dead, 1 missing, 2 wounded. The air reeked of gunpowder and wet earth. We radioed for extraction, but no one answered. I just sat there, looking at the photo in my hand, the one I'd taken from around the dead man's neck. I kept it, still have it, even now. Not as a trophy, as a reminder that in war, mercy and murder wear the same face. When the choppers finally came at dusk, I didn't feel relief, just emptiness. The jungle looked almost beautiful from above, glowing gold in the dying light, hiding all the bodies beneath its leaves. Beauty and horror, side by side, like they belonged to the same creation. And maybe they did. Maybe that's what the war taught me, that we're all made of both, and the only difference is which one wins before the end. Sometimes when I dream, I still see her walking into that river. Sometimes I see her waiting on the other side, holding the photo, watching me through the mist. I wonder if she ever knew what I did. I wonder if she would have forgiven me. Tell me something. If you had been there, if you were the one holding that rifle, seeing what I saw, would you have pulled the trigger? Would you have saved her, knowing what it might mean later? Comment it below. Just write this. I don't know if I'd have had the strength, because I still don't know if I did. When the noise finally stopped, I thought I'd gone deaf. My ears rang for hours after the shooting. A high whine like the war had burned itself into my skull. The jungle smelled like rain and iron. Every breath carried the taste of rust and smoke. The men moved around in silence, collecting helmets, weapons, dog tags, anything that proved a man had once been there. I remember holding one of those tags in my hand, Haynes's, and feeling nothing. Not sadness, not fear, just emptiness. It scared me more than any bullet ever had. You can fight through pain, through loss, through fear. But once the feeling's gone, once your heart goes quiet, that's when the real dying starts. We buried the bodies near the tree line, shallow graves because the ground was too wet to dig deep. We marked them with sticks, not crosses. The jungle didn't care about symbols. The rain came again that night, soft at first, then harder, washing the blood from our clothes and the mud from our faces. I sat under a tarp, staring at the photo I'd taken from the dead man's neck. I kept turning it over in my hands, wondering if it really was her husband. Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe every man we killed was someone's husband. That thought stayed with me long after the rain stopped. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces. Not just his, not just hers, but dozens of them, fading in and out like ghosts in the dark. Some were ours, some were theirs. I couldn't tell anymore. The line between friend and enemy had blurred until it vanished. I woke up shaking, my hand gripping the rifle before I even knew why. The night air was cold. My breath came out in clouds. For a moment, I thought I heard someone walking near the trees. I raised the gun, but there was no one there, just the jungle whispering like it always did, telling me I'd never really leave. Days later, we reached the extraction point. The boats came through the mist, quiet, engines humming low. We boarded without a word. The officer in charge didn't ask what happened. He just looked at us, the few who were left, and wrote something in his log. Numbers, coordinates, casualties. To him, we were data. To me, we were ghosts. I sat near the edge of the boat, watching the shoreline fade into the fog. The jungle looked peaceful again, as if it hadn't eaten a dozen men in the last week. I realized then that war doesn't end when the guns stop. It just moves inside you. When we reached the base, they gave us food, clean uniform, new orders. Like the last mission had been nothing more than a storm we'd weathered. I remember sitting in the mess tent, spoon in hand, staring at the grey stew in front of me, unable to taste it. The laughter around me sounded wrong, hollow, too loud, like everyone was trying to drown out the noise still echoing inside. I looked at the photo again, folded it small, and tucked it into my breast pocket, close to my heart. It felt like a confession I could never say out loud. That night, I walked down to the beach. The sea was calm, black under the stars. The moonlight rippled over the water like silk. I thought about home, the streetlights, the sound of trains in the distance, the smell of my mother's cooking drifting through the window. I wondered if she still prayed for me. I wondered if God even listened to men like me anymore. The waves broke gently against the shore, washing over my boots. I thought about the river again, the one where I'd left her, and how she'd turned back once, just to look. I hadn't understood that look then. Now I think I do. It wasn't fear, it was forgiveness. The guilt doesn't fade, it shifts. It settles into the cracks, into the quiet moments when you think you're finally free. You'll be shaving one morning years later, see your reflection, and for a split second, it's not your face you see, it's his or hers. The war teaches you to carry the dead with grace, because you can't carry them any other way. That's what surviving means, not forgetting, just learning how to keep breathing while you remember. I started writing letters again around that time, not to anyone in particular, just words on paper, things I couldn't say out loud. The first one began, "If you ever forgive me, I'll try to forgive myself." I never sent it. Maybe I didn't need to. Maybe she heard it anyway. Sometimes I wonder if mercy's just another kind of cowardice, a way to feel human when everything around you is broken. But then I remember her face, that moment she said, "You see me." And I think maybe mercy is the last piece of us that war can't take. If you've ever carried something you can't name, a mistake, a regret, a memory you can't bury, then you already know what I mean. Stay with me, because the war didn't end there, not for me. The hardest part came after, when the world expected us to live like nothing had happened. And that's where I'll take you next. When the war ended, they told us we'd won. The words sounded strange in my mouth, hollow, like biting into something that used to have taste. The ships came to take us home, and I remember standing on the deck, watching the shoreline vanish, wondering what it meant to go home when the person who'd left it no longer existed. The ocean stretched in every direction, endless and calm, and I felt smaller than I ever had in that jungle. We were supposed to be heroes now. People smiled when we passed, women waved, children pointed, but inside, we were still crouched in the mud, listening for a sound that never stopped ringing. The first night back in the States, I slept in a real bed for the first time in years. The sheets felt too clean, the air too quiet. I woke up 3 times before dawn, hand reaching for a rifle that wasn't there. My mother cried when she saw me. My father shook my hand like I was someone else. They asked questions I couldn't answer. Was it bad? Did you kill anyone? Are you glad to be back? I told them what they needed to hear. I said it was over, but war doesn't end. It just changes shape. It follows you into your dreams, hides in the silence between conversations, waits in the sound of fireworks or a car backfiring down the street. I tried to work. I tried to smile. I even went to church once, thinking maybe I could pray the noise out of my head. But sitting there, listening to the hymns, I felt like an imposter among the living. The preacher talked about forgiveness, about redemption, about the peace that comes to those who believe. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the God he spoke of could look at me, at what I'd done, what I'd seen, and still see something worth saving. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces. The nurse by the river, the young soldier in the mud, the photo still folded in my pocket. Their eyes followed me through every prayer. I moved out to the countryside not long after that. Couldn't stand the noise of the city. Bought a small piece of land. Built a cabin with my own hands. I thought the quiet would help. It didn't. The silence out there was different, thicker, lonelier. At night, the wind moved through the trees, and I'd swear I could hear whispers, like the jungle had followed me home. I kept my rifle by the bed for years, never used it, just needed to know it was there. Some nights, when the air got still, and the moonlight cut through the curtains just right, I'd take out the photo. It's faded now, the edges torn, the faces barely visible. I'd look at it until my eyes blurred, trying to imagine the life they had before we came, before the war turned everything into ash. I used to wonder if she made it out of that jungle, if she ever crossed the river, if she found her people, or if they found her first. I wondered if she ever thought of me, the American who spared her, the one who took her husband's life without knowing. Sometimes I think she must have hated me. Sometimes I hope she didn't. Years went by. The world moved on. People stopped talking about the war except in textbook parades. They called it history, like it belonged to another world. But for me, it never left. It stayed in the small thing, the smell of wet soil after rain, the sound of boots on gravel, the way thunder still makes my chest tighten. The war became part of the way I breathe, a rhythm, a scar you stop seeing but never stop feeling. I kept in touch with some of the men who made it home. Not many. Most of us preferred silence. Haynes's wife wrote to me once. A short letter, simple handwriting. She said she'd heard how he'd died. She said she was proud. I never wrote back. How could I tell her the truth? That he hadn't died like a hero, that none of us did. We just died tired, scared and too young. Now I'm an old man sitting on a porch that looks out over fields that used to be forest. Kids ride their bikes down the road, laughing. They don't look at me much. I don't blame them. To them, I'm just a story they'll read about once and forget. But every now and then, one of them will stop and ask what it was like. I tell them the same thing every time. It was hot, it was loud, and it never really ends. I've learned that memory isn't something you lose, it's something you learn to carry differently. Some days it feels lighter, some days it crushes you, but it's yours, and maybe carrying it is the only way to honor the ones who can't anymore. I used to think I was cursed to remember. Now I think forgetting would be worse, because if I forget, then they disappear for good, and maybe the only thing worse than dying is being erased. I don't know if telling these stories makes any difference. Maybe it's just a way of talking to ghosts, or maybe it's my way of forgiving myself for still. But if even one person hears it and understands that war isn't about medals or glory, that it's about people, fragile and flawed, caught in something too big to understand, then maybe that's enough. So I keep talking, I keep remembering, because someone has to. Sometimes I wake before the sun rises and just sit there, watching the light crawl across the floors, feeling the weight of another morning I didn't expect. The world outside has changed so much that it feels like another planet. The roads are quieter now, but not because of fear, because people have learned how to live again. I like that. I like knowing that laughter still exists somewhere, that children still run barefoot through the grass without thinking of landmines, that men can look at the sky without wondering if it's hiding an enemy. That's the kind of victory no general could ever plan, the kind that comes long after the guns go silent. There are days I still talk to her, not out loud, just inside my head. I wonder if she had a daughter. I wonder if that girl grew up never knowing that her mother was once spared by an American soldier who couldn't explain why. Sometimes I imagine her walking by the same river, maybe holding her own child's hand, telling stories about forgiveness without ever saying the word. It's strange how mercy survives when everything else dies. Maybe it's the only thing that does. I used to think survival meant walking away, but I learned that real survival means facing what follows you and learning how to stand in its shadow without letting it swallow you. I still dream about the jungle, not the battle, not the killing, just the sound, that low hum of life beneath the fear, the way the rain would fall in sheets thick enough to wash the blood away for a few minutes, giving us the illusion that the earth forgave us. When I wake, sometimes I swear I can smell the damp soil again. I think that's my mind, reminding me that I came from a place where men learned how fragile their humanity really was. It doesn't scare me anymore. It's just part of me, like the scars on my hands or the ache in my knees when it rains. The world calls us veterans now. It's a kind word, a clean word, like it can hold all the ugliness we've seen inside 4 simple letters. People thank me for my service sometimes. I nod and say thank you back, but what I really want to tell them is this. We didn't fight for medals or flags. We fought because the man next to us needed one more breath, one more second to go home. We fought because not fighting meant letting go of the only thing that made us human, each other. And when we came back, the hardest battle wasn't over there. It was learning how to live with ourselves again. The photo still sits on my desk. The colors are gone now, but I can still trace the faces with my thumb. Every time I look at it, I feel a strange peace, not because I've made sense of it, but because I've stopped trying to. Some things aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be carried. And maybe that's what this life is, carrying the weight of what you've done and the weight of what you chose not to do, side by side, until one day they balance each other out. When people ask me what war taught me, I tell them the truth. It taught me how precious ordinary life is, the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of rain on a tin roof, the warmth of another person's hand. It taught me that peace isn't something you sign, it's something you build quietly, every day, by choosing not to hate. And that's why I tell these stories, because one day I'll be gone, and all that will be left are words drifting somewhere between memory and silence. But maybe, if you're hearing this now, if you followed me through every step, the mud, the fear, the mercy, the loss, then part of that truth will live on in you. That's all I want, for someone to remember that beneath the uniform, beneath the history book, there was a man who tried his best to be human, in a place that demanded he be anything but. So if you've listened this far, if any part of this story stayed with you, then help me keep them alive. Like this, share it, subscribe, not for me, but for them, for the ones who never made it home, and for the ones who did but left part of themselves behind. Keep their voices alive, because once the stories are forgotten, the truth goes with them, and the truth is all we have left.